One really important thing I've realized as an online fitness coach is that as soon as the momentum, as soon as the motivation kind of wears out within the first couple of weeks, maybe some progress might slow down, it's easy to kind of fall off track. So if you're not really addicted to making progress, you're going to have some trouble staying on track. So this video is going to talk about how to become addicted to progress and rewire your brain. So the first and probably the most important thing is dopamine cues. What are you getting dopamine out of? So we're going to talk about that. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that marks something as worth doing again, and it teaches your brain that actions lead to good outcomes, so you repeat it. We all kind of know what cheap dopamine is. You can see the pictures right here, but pretty much it's fast, low effort dopamine spikes from easy, repeatable stimuli that require no meaningful skill or effort and then deliver instant gratification. So this could be stuff like doom scrolling on fucking TikTok, watching porn, binging late at night, whatever. You want to cut this out as much as you can, especially porn. If you're watching porn, just completely cut it out. But you notice as soon as you're done doing all of this, you immediately regret it. And that's why we got to cut this out. So we've got to replace this with higher value dopamine cues. So next time you get a little hit of dopamine, you want to ask yourself 3 questions. Did it take real effort or skill? If no, it's probably cheap dopamine. Does it move you towards a goal that you care about? If no, it's probably cheap dopamine. And will you be glad you did it tomorrow? If no, it's probably cheap dopamine. You're not going to be glad you did any of these things tomorrow. Let's be real. So the more you cut out cheap dopamine, the more you're going to want to put in some real effort to get the higher value dopamine hits. You know, if you've ever studied for a test and really feel confident after studying for a couple hours, that's a high value hit of dopamine. Or of course, hitting a good lift after a day you didn't really feel like going, you're going to feel immediately better. And that's the dopamine that we want to start chasing instead. Because the more we cut out cheap dopamine and the more we link it to higher value cues, the more your brain's going to start craving that actual work instead. So if you've ever noticed, when you go to the gym, maybe you have a dedicated playlist or a dedicated song specifically for the gym, your brain kind of gets into that mental state of, oh, it's time to lock in, it's time to lift, right? That's because your brain's sort of wired to that song, to that playlist, so it kind of associates it to the gym. The same thing applies for getting work done, studying, whatever. Like, I like to listen to ocean waves or deep phase noise, and it kind of helps me snap into that mode. So hold off on certain songs or certain playlists until you're about to go to the gym, you're on the way to the gym, so your brain can kind of get into that mental state. Oh, it's time to work out, or oh, it's time to get some work done. That's how you associate certain songs and certain playlists to certain mental states that you want to be in. Next thing we're going to talk about is minimum viable day, MVD. MVD is the smallest set of actions that keep your identity, streak, and progress loop alive, even on bad days. If you've ever noticed, if you've had a bad day, everything kind of just seems out of whack, you don't really feel like doing anything, and you kind of just let yourself go out of the day, say you're going to make a better day tomorrow. The MVD allows you to still make progress even if you do have a shitty day. So it fires every day because it's tiny by design, and it's tied by a cue, log for proof, and followed by a small sensory reward. And here's why it works. So you continue your progress, and consistency teaches your brain that progress is inevitable. You could also pair it with a hit of dopamine, and it maintains momentum. So when life hits, you shrink to your MVD so you don't lose momentum. And keeping your momentum is extremely important, especially in your fitness journey, so you don't fall down a downward spiral. So an example of an MVD is doing push-ups as soon as you wake up, and that kind of sets the day off right. That's what I do every day. As soon as I wake up, I do 1 set of push-ups until failure. Even if I'm damn near falling asleep while doing the push-ups, it will wake me up. So the cue is waking up, and you could label your alarm push-ups if you'd like, just a reminder. And the action is doing 1 set of push-ups until failure. Then check it on your to-do list. And your tiny reward is the dopamine hit that you get from your pump. You look in the mirror, you got to pump dopamine. Boom. You also want to have an anti-setback protocol in place, and I'm going to go into detail of what this looks like. So you want to determine what counts as a setback. So a setback is any break in your progress loop or a signal that your progress system didn't fit. And common types of setbacks include input misses, so you skip the input you control, your MVD, steps, protein, workout session, or a loop break, so your cue didn't trigger. For example, your alarm labeled push-ups didn't trigger you to do push-ups, which didn't trigger that dopamine hit in the morning. And that could be labeled as a setback. An output stall, so your weight, strength, energy stalled or dipped for a week. You overreach, so your plan was way too big for your lowest energy days. And cheap dopamine takeover, so you're scrolling, watching porn, whatever, you're binge eating, or getting some work done and a couple notifications pop up on your phone. Now all of a sudden you're scrolling on TikTok for an hour and a half. Boom. So it's good to know that a setback is a system signal, not a character flaw, and it shows what you need to adjust next. So there's always something you can learn from it. You need to have a weekly anti-setback protocol in place, and I would recommend journaling for this because journaling is truly the key to reflection. So this is how your weekly anti-setback or weekly reflection protocol should go. So one sentence a week. This week felt blank because blank. How many times did you hit your minimum viable day out of 7? Did you hit your steps? Did you track your protein to a T? And how many lifts did you hit that you were supposed to hit? Did your weight, strength, and waist go up, down, or stay the same? And one emotion in the week. So example, stressed, steady, or proud of your progress. You can list up to 3 setbacks, and you want to go deep onto the biggest one that set you back throughout the week. So trigger, what started it? What did you tell yourself? And a feeling in one word. What happened? Immediate in the next day effect. What did you learn about your needs and limits? And for the experiment, one small change to test next week to try to prevent that setback. You also want to have a cheap dopamine audit. So biggest junk that displaces your effort. Maybe it was scrolling, maybe it was binge eating, whatever. So a barrier for next week. For example, grayscale your phone until your MVD is done. If your MVD is studying for 20 minutes, just minimum 20 minutes. Then you want to have your phone on grayscale so you're not willing to, go on TikTok and scroll for an hour and a half until your studying for 20 minutes is done. Then you can switch it to, regular colors, whatever. But you want to have a barrier in place so you're less willing to fall into that cheap dopamine trap. You also want to write out something that you want to keep, stop, and start. So you want to keep something that's working, of course. You want to stop something that's blocking you towards reaching your goal. So any friction or junk, and you want to make a tiny upgrade that could help you towards reaching your goal a little bit faster maybe. So it could be something like wake up an hour early, nothing crazy, just a tiny upgrade that can help you out. You also want to have a plan for the next week, so you're going into the next week with clarity. So your identity line can be, I keep promises to myself, and next week's MVD. You also want to have a fallback. So for example, if you miss your MVD, then donate $20 to a buddy. That's your stakes. You also want to have your cues set for the next week so it makes everything easier. So your alarm labels, you want to have those set. So maybe your push-ups alarm in the morning or your studying alarm or your gym alarm, what have you. And your daily journal templates. Daily journaling is great. I would recommend it. But you want to at least be journaling weekly so you could reflect on how your week went. You also want to have your meals prep for the week. It just makes eating meals a whole lot easier, especially when you're short on time throughout the week. So now that you understand all of these principles, let's talk about the goal setting. Long-term goal setting, your macro goal. So your goal is to build an image that your brain wants to move toward. And this is going to be your daily reminder of who you're becoming and what you're working toward. So I'd recommend journaling this vision frame so you could go back and look over it to see what you're working towards. So what do you see in the mirror or closet? For example, 185 pounds lean, slim waist, chest and abs popping through the compression tee, and tailored suits in the closet, whatever. How do you feel? So are you energized and confident? What cars do you have? What watches do you have? What clothing and accessories? Do you have any awards? You want to go into as much detail as you can and make it as vivid as you can so you have a visual reminder of what you're working towards every single day. So now that you visualize your future self, it's important to break it down into micro goals that can be completed daily. So for example, if your long-term goal is getting a jacked and aesthetic physique, which is vague, you want to go into detail like the 185 pounds lean, slim waist, whatever. You want to break it down because what a lot of people don't realize is that they're not capable of getting the jacked aesthetic physique. The version of yourself that is capable never misses training, tracks macros to a T, hits her step target every single day, hits their hydration target every single day, gets 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And you want to go into detail. What can you be doing every single day to reach that goal? Because you need to change your identity before you can become the person that you want to become a lot of the time. And your goal should be so big and so vivid that you need to change your identity in order to become that person. For the scheduled training, if you're sick, that's one thing. But if you miss a day, if time crunch, just hit a 30-minute at-home workout. You can do 300 push-ups, 200 pull-ups, 300 air squats, doesn't matter. Just do some 30-minute at-home workout. We all have 30 minutes in a day, okay? Stay up a little bit later if you need to. Also, tracking your macros to a T. And a lot of people say, tracking my macros is too hard. It feels like homework. I'm sorry, but you've kind of already lost. If you're not willing to track your macros to get to a certain goal that you want to achieve or you say you want to achieve, you're kind of already lost. But if you're truly willing to put in the work, to put in the effort to actually achieve a certain goal, then I'm willing to work with you. I'll put a link in the description to apply for my one-on-one coaching if you want me to guide you through the entire transformation process step by step and help you finally get to that goal. But seriously, only apply if you're serious and actually willing to put in some effort to achieve that goal.